All right, my name is Larnelle Farmer. I'm originally from Waukegan, Illinois, which is about 40 miles north of Chicago. And as I said before, I'm the president of the West Valley NAACP, and we started this branch back in 2018. And we saw a need for the branch out in the West Valley because the West Valley is growing. And so we needed a branch to try to address some of the issues that we face every day out here, again, specifically in the West Valley. But I've been in Arizona since 2012, and I moved here my wife got a job offer. Had never been to Arizona, didn't know anybody in Arizona. The only thing I really knew about Arizona was back in the 80s, they didn't want Martin Luther King's birthday to be recognized federally. And the only other thing I remember about Arizona was, I think it was Waiting to Exhale.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
That's all I knew about Arizona, and that was it. So I knew I didn't want to come here because of the Martin Luther King thing back in the day. But like I said, my wife got the job offer. She works in human resources. And so at that time, it was early in the wintertime of 2012. My anniversary date at the police department was July 7th. It was July 7th. And so I told my wife, after July 7th, we can go, explore, moving to Arizona, because I didn't want to lose another year of retirement that close to July 7th. So we came to Arizona sometime in the summer of 2012. And we got here, and I fell in love right away because we got here about midnight. The flight landed. And so when we walked out of the airport, I remember going outside and feeling the heat. And I thought I was in the exhaust fumes of a bus because at midnight it was so hot. And then I realized, no, this is just hot. And so I'm like, okay, this is cool. So we went to the resort we were staying in for that visit. And the sole purpose was just to come and just check Arizona out. So the next morning we woke up, we're gonna do the tourist thing, drive around and see what's going on. And I remember getting in the car, and it was, I think the thermometer read on the car like 120 degrees. I'm like, this is insane, but I loved it. And so, like the heat, I knew it wasn't snowing here. Came back, I think we came back maybe in July, sometime like that, looking for a house and trying to get everything in order to move. So I went back to work and I told them I'm moving to Arizona. Nobody believed me. So I turned in my paperwork, and it was dated August 31st of 2012, my retirement papers. And so August 31st was my last day at work. September 5th, we were on a plane. We had moved the whole house, 2 cars, to Arizona without a hitch, and I knew we had done the right thing. So that's how I ended up in Arizona.
Wow.
That was it.
Now, you retired from the police department.
Yes, sir.
Seen a lot, done a lot.
Yeah.
As an African-American man in a major city, what was being a police officer like for you?
It was something that I thought I'd never do. And growing up, I used to watch all the police movies, the Westerns, and all the military movies and all of that stuff. But for a lack of knowledge, I guess I was ignorant from that standpoint. Because when I became a police officer, I grew up running from the police. Because I knew, being in the city, being who I was, being black, me and my friends, especially if we didn't do anything, the police gonna hem you up. That was the persona. That's what we learned. Maybe it not being the correct thing, but it was what it was, from TV and movies, and older people tell you what to do and all of that stuff. And so, like I said, I grew up running from the police. So being a police officer in a city that you grew up in, I think that presents a different dynamic, because when I started on the police department, the day I graduated from the police academy, they give you a letter saying where you're supposed to report, this shift, this unit, whatever the case may be. And the letter that I received, it said I would be working on this special ops unit, working from 6 at night to 2 in the morning. And it said dress casually. And I graduated on a Tuesday. and I had Wednesday off, and they said report on Thursday. And so I get to the station, I tell them who I am, and they said, you know where you're going? I said, no. So they took me back to this room. And I walk in this room, and it was a room full of white guys. They all had long hair, earrings, beards. They looked like a bunch of hippies. And so they said, come on in. They introduced themselves, and they said, we're doing something, because this is during the crack epidemic, all of that. So they said, well, what we want you to do, we're going to give you some money. You're going to go out on the street and you're going to start buying drugs. And I'm like, what the hell, buying drugs? I didn't know anything about drugs. Didn't do it, buying. And so they said, let's go. I'm like, dang. So they took me out to this middle school, and they said, you know, this program, what we're doing should only last maybe a couple weeks. We're trying to make a dent into the street market crack, you know, sales. I'm like, okay. So they took me.
Let me ask you right there. So you just graduated from the academy.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not a rookie. I mean, you're a rookie for all intents and purposes.
Correct. After 3 months.
You're not cutting your teeth as a patrol officer, foot officer, anything. You get thrown right into an outfit, if you will.
Yep.
Okay. I just wanted to make that clear.
No, it was, and that's the unusual part, because it was no training. I wasn't at that time, because usually you go to patrol, you get a FTO, a field training officer, and they show you the ropes, because you learn the stuff in the academy. Then as the saying goes, now that you're here, we're going to teach you how it really goes. Mm-hmm. And so I never got that. So my indoctrination, my cutting my teeth, was they took me out to that middle school. All these brothers out there playing basketball. Some of them I knew. And my first 3 hours as a police officer, I played basketball for 3 hours. And so I had this undercover car. I get back in the car, and they were down the street, you know, watching to make sure I didn't get hurt or anything. And so I get back in the car, and I go to the station. They say, how did it go? Like, I guess it went fine. You know, I know so-and-so, they playing ball, this playing ball. Were any drugs you see? I said, I didn't really see anything. And then,
so were you designated at this point as an undercover cop?
Yes, I was.
Okay.
And as I said, it was no training. That was my training that first day.
But you knew that's what you were at that point.
You know, I knew what I was, and it was I wasn't scared, but I didn't know what the hell I was doing.
Yeah.
And so what saved me at that time was, because we had to live in the town we worked in. And like I said, I grew up in that town, and I knew a lot of the people, went to high school with them, you know, played sports with them and all that stuff. They didn't know I was a police officer. Because what usually happens is, and this goes back to when I first graduated, or first was sworn in as a police officer. Usually, you know, they put it in the paper. We hired some new officers, and, you know, the whole swearing in ceremony. Mine was different. I was in a back conference room with the chief, and I didn't know any better. I didn't know how it worked. Raised my hand, sworn, he gave me my badge. Now you're a police officer. I'm like, that was kind of, you know, unceremonial and all of that stuff. And I didn't have any family members there, nothing. And that's how it went. But I'm naive to the process. And so
it reminds me of that scene in Donnie Brasco at the end of that.
Yep.
They just give him a little award.
And go on about your business. And that's how it happened. And so I'm sitting there dumbfounded. So later on, the sergeant calls, you know, you're going to go to the police academy on this date and time and all that stuff. So I did that, went to the police academy, graduated, got that letter, ended up on that drug unit. And so after that first day, then the lieutenant of the unit, they started getting more information from informants. So they started introducing me to informants, and informants would introduce me to different people. And so next thing I know, there's 2 weeks. They were supposed to last for 2 weeks, this assignment. It was like 6 months. And I'm buying crack from everybody, heroin from everybody.
Now, was this your neighborhood or?
I was all over town, but specifically my neighborhood, because
you didn't run into anyone that knew you or that recognized
you? Well, what
you?
saved me was they knew who I was, but they didn't know I was a police officer or a cop, because at that time my girlfriend was in law school, and she had an apartment down on the south side of the city. So when I would get off work, I would go straight to her apartment and hang out down in the city, and then come back and do my thing and then go back. And so the specific neighborhoods that I was working in is a neighborhood I grew up where my parents lived. And then other neighborhoods, quote unquote, in the hood, was where everybody, you know, the brothers standing on the corner selling crack. And I understood the premise of it because just like anybody that has property, you don't want anybody standing in front of your house doing illegal stuff.
Of course.
So I understood that premise, but I understood also that this was the street level. Are we going to go into some of these bars where the other people hang out and start, getting into them and start arresting them? And that never happened. And so, like I said, the 2 weeks turned into 6 months until one day I was driving down the street and this brother walked up to me, and I knew him from high school, and I had already been buying drugs from him. And he said, he called me by my first name because I knew him. He said, Larnelle. I said, what's up? And he said, we know you the police. I said, really? He said, you come back down here, we're gonna kill you. I said, oh, really?
Gave you a warning.
Oh, he told me. I said, I appreciate it, all right. So I go back to the station. I said, hey, this guy told me if I come back down there, you're gonna kill me. They said, who said that? And I said, it was blah, blah, blah. He said, how you know? I said, I know him from high school and he's on our list. And they said, okay, this assignment is over. So he became our first arrest. And so for like maybe the next month or so, what we did, all of the undercover stuff stopped. So we started putting arrest packets together. So it was maybe like upwards, maybe like 100 some odd different people that I bought drugs from. So the next part of this assignment was going out and arresting these people. So that's what it was. So that went from, that was when I started in 1989. That went from 89 to 90, to the spring of 90. So I got through with that assignment. Then I went to patrol, and that's when I got the FTO and all of that stuff. But the crazy part about that was my FTO training was in the areas where I was buying drugs from everybody. So I'm in full uniform, and the guy who was training me said, you're gonna get us killed every day. We're in the housing projects and all this stuff. Wherever we went, we gonna kill you. That's all I kept hearing every day. We gonna kill you. You set us up, you gonna kill you. All this stuff. And so I did patrol for a year. Then there was a permanent opening back in the drug unit. I applied and got that. And that's where I stayed for another 10 years in drugs and gangs. And that's how my career started. So when it came to...
So let me ask you this. Because it was my naive understanding that when you go into an undercover situation, typically they put you in an environment that you're not from. So you don't get made by anyone, right?
Right.
That's not the case. And then you go back into that environment in uniform, possibly running into people that you...
There was no possibly, it happened.
Running into people that
that I had bought from.
Yeah.
And the crazy part was that I didn't know any better. I loved it. It was like living a movie, and that goes back to being naive. And it was like living a movie, because I remember I would be out on a date. The pager would go off, or the cell phone, whatever we had at that time, and I gotta go. We're doing a search warrant. We're doing this. It was just like living a movie, and the whole 9 yards. But then slowly, like I said, what started to happen, I started to see that it was just us that was getting arrested. And again, I understand that, there's certain things you don't want people doing in your neighborhood and all that other stuff, because the crime and the drive-by shootings, all that stuff started happening. But again, I never saw anybody that didn't look like me. Occasionally we would do a search warrant on somebody like that or arrest somebody. But overall, it was people that looked like me. And it got so bad.
Now, is it because, you're in a part of town, or you're in a city that's predominantly black?
No, it was, I say the mixture. It was just like in society, it wasn't predominantly black. It was more non-black people in the town at that time.
Okay.
But it goes back to anything else. Where's the focus? And so the focus was on this street level stuff and all of that. But it just got to where I ended up on a couple task force, and but it was still the same people that we were arresting, and they looked more like me. Because it even got to the point where we did like an exchange program with officers. So I would go to another city, and then they would give us another officer, because, you don't want to, like you said, get made. We know that's so-and-so, he's a police officer. So we switched cities, but it was the same thing, whatever city you went to. But it goes back to that thing of that you see a lot of times in politics, the war on crime. The war on crime is not really a war on crime. It's a war that they can put us in front of the TV and we're always the criminal. And so that makes people feel good that the police are doing something about crime. No, you're not. You're not making a dent in anything.
Mm-hmm.
You're getting that brother or sister off the street, and then you realize that brother or sister's just hustling. They're not really making any money, and all of that
street
stuff.
Street level,
exactly.
Small people. But the real players are they're the informants.
Exactly.
They're the guys that are, for the most part, untouchable.
Exactly. That quickly became apparent because that was back around the time. And I remember, what was that Whitney Houston said? She does cocaine because crack is whack.
Yeah.
Like there's a difference, you know.
She don't do crack.
Right.
Crack is whack.
Like that's a different. But it goes, and that made me realize that was a society thing. So it's okay to do cocaine, but if you are doing crack, you're a crackhead. Well, one high is no different or better than the other high, but because and I look at it as, that pure white stuff, and it goes back to society. What is pure and white? Black is evil, white is good, so all of that stuff. And so, like I said, I started seeing all of that stuff and seeing that the difference in people of color, black people, with crack or with cocaine, the difference between in sentencing and how we arrested them, how they were treated in arrest, all of that stuff, you start seeing it and you're like, this system is
at what point in your career, because you're from the street, you're black, mm-hmm. you're already aware of these unfair systems. Mm-hmm. At what point in your career did you start saying, you know what, I can't be a part of this no more, or I want to address this at the very least in some kind of way?
One day, I was in the weight room, and there was a brother. He was on patrol, and I hadn't seen him in a while, so I just happened to run into him in the hallway. I'm like, "What's up? I ain't seen you in a minute." We start. He said, "Man, I just resigned." I'm like, "What you mean you resigned?" He had gotten into some issue, at a bar or something, and then what they would do, the union would take our money. The black officers, they would take our money, but they didn't give us the same representation as they would with the white officers. So he said he resigned. I'm like, man. And I had seen that before, but this one hit me really, really hard. I'm like, what happened? He said, they had me in the office, and what they would do, they would take you in the office, and the COs, most of them, well, at that time, they were predominantly white. And even if the black COs were around, they weren't part of this. And they would take you in there and they get you in the corner, so to speak, and they would beat you up, not physically, but mentally. You're young, we got you on this, you did this, you did that, but you're young, that's what's going good for you. And we want you to resign before we have to fire you. And they would always talk you into resigning. And then it would come back, well, if they didn't do anything wrong, they could have fought this and stayed. So I used to see that all the time. It was like we would hire one black officer and then we'd get rid of 2 or 3. And it was always that pressure they were putting on us, to resign. But that became, we don't allow rogue officers or crooked officers on our department. Because look, we got this one resigned because of this, that, and the other. But then I quickly realized that we didn't have any protection as black officers.
Do you think that was their way of making sure that the numbers never rose, a percentage of officers never rose to above a certain level?
I think that's part of it, but I think also the thing was, and you see it today, that, this tough on crime, tough on, we police the police. But the policing of the police usually was with us as black officers, where they came down harder on us, but then they could parade us in front of the cameras, so to speak, then say that, we don't allow this, we don't tolerate this, that, and the other, because look what we've done. We've gotten rid of this one, we got rid of that one. And like I said, they never fired anybody, always talked you into resigning. And so when I was talking to that brother, it hit me hard, and I'm like, man, we got to do something. And so I started thinking, what can I do? So I started kicking this idea around of starting an African-American Police Association. And I'm kicking around talking to people, and all of this stuff, different brothers and sisters. And then one day, it was this police officer, this white cop. Dude, he was in charge of the union. And when I say racist, I'm understating racist. Mm-hmm. And he had a drinking problem. And he was in the weight room one day. And there was a secretary or somebody in the weight room, and this rookie white officer was in the weight room also. And then my college roommate, he was a sergeant at that time. And there was a long hallway to get into the weight room. And he heard them in there talking. He just stopped to listen. And I think, yeah, he was a sergeant. And he heard the drunk officer, the lady asked him, is there going to be a city council meeting this coming Monday? And he said no, because it's Martin Luther King's birthday. And he went on this rant. You need to line them all up against the wall and shoot them. He's talking about black people. Shoot them all. They're this, they're that.
Now, was he saying this in front of black people?
No, it was just the white secretary in there and the rookie white officer in the weight room. And like I said, the black sergeant was in the hallway and heard all of this stuff.
Okay.
So he reported it, did all the stuff that he was supposed to do with it, the sergeant did. And then it got out that this white officer was being treated unfairly because, he didn't really mean to say what he said and all this stuff. So it caused a big stir in the police department. And that was the first time I really saw that issues like that were being addressed, not maybe taken seriously because it became the camps. It was like us against them. And so the white officers were behind him. He ended up getting suspended for 30 days. And they made him step down from the union. The biggest thing with him was getting stepped down from the union because he was completely union. That was his life blood. Being a police officer and a union, that was him. And so I kept telling people, I said, there's something happening behind the scenes. And so we started these diversity meetings and all that crap, which was nothing really, Band-Aid approach to something. And so what happened was we didn't really know the bylaws of the union like we should have. So with him being the immediate past president, he still sat on the board of the union and was still part of it. So I got mad and I started doing some research on him, and I found some other articles of different stuff he had done and said about black people. So I printed these things off. I posted them all over the police department. And I got called up to the chief's office. You can't do this. Why not? Because, you're violating his this, that, and the other. I said, no, I'm not. I said, this is union business. I'm posted it all on the union boards all around. Well, he's going to be mad. I don't care about him being mad. So we had a election coming up, and I kept telling people, this thing is not over, And so this is some time had passed since he got the suspension and everything. And there was this one brother that was stepping up to be run for a position on the union, on the board. Now, I was going to all the union meetings, and I was going just to see what they were talking about because I understood that they weren't representing us. They were just taking our money. And so that night at that union meeting, the brother didn't show up. Since he didn't show up, somebody else stepped up and ran for the position, and all they needed was one vote. So I got mad. So I went home that night and laying in the bed, couldn't sleep. My wife, what's wrong? I said, it's stuff on my mind. So at that time I was in the detective bureau. So I got up, I started work at 8 o'clock. So it was about maybe 4 or 5 in the morning. I got up and she said, where you going? I said, I got dressed and I went to the station. I said, I'm going in because I need to, type something up. So I go to the station and I'm typing away. Went to the meeting last night. Everything that I saw reminded me of a Klan meeting. The only thing that was missing were the sheets. And I'm typing, this what happened. We're not getting any representation, black officers around here, all this stuff. And so I hit the button to send it out. Now this is email going throughout the police department, the city. So I hit that button it was about 7:58, 7:59. And mind you, like I said, I started work at 8 o'clock. So I hit that button. Later on that day, you think a bomb went off in the station. So everybody started getting that email. White officers off duty come flying in. They're having meetings all over the department. They're running up to the chief's office. Something's got to be done with. He called us Klan members. He said this. He's a racist. I get called in office. I said, no, I didn't. I said, read what it says. I said it had all the appearances of a Klan meeting. The only thing missing were the sheets. And so they're going around, they're trying to find some way to suspend me. They said I was doing this on duty. I said, no, I wasn't. Look, when I hit that button to send it out, it was before 8 o'clock. Well, you can't use company property to put some. I said people put personal stuff on here all the time. I had it all printed out ready for the arguments they were coming at me with. People selling boats, selling whatever, family pictures, all this stuff is on the email system.
All that was good.
Yeah, so I had all this stuff lined up. So they kept after me, all this stuff. So one day, one of the brothers came, he said, man, they got a petition going around trying to get people to sign it to get you fired. I'm like, really? So I try to find an officer with the petition, but he had already gone out on the street. So I found 2 more of his cohorts, and I told him, I said, look, you guys can't do anything to me, just leave me alone. That's all I'm asking. So we got into an argument and with both of these officers. So they run to the chief's office and they make up this stuff that one of them feared for his life because he knew I was a police officer and I had a gun. And so eventually they gave me, I got a written reprimand. And because I got into an argument with those 2 clowns, it later turned into a 2-day suspension. So that was the meat of my career, was always fighting stuff like that. Like I said, the brother who said he resigned, I got this African-American Police Association together, and the sole purpose of this was to make sure we got fair representation for somebody, or we had each other's back on the police department, something that the union was not doing for us.
So, now, do you feel like at that point you had a target on your back?
Oh yeah, I knew it.
And how did you navigate that with, the daily work that you had to do?
Well, at that time, by then I was off the drug unit, I was out of the gang unit and all of that stuff. And I was working 8 to 4, Monday through Friday. And it was, we get called in if there was a homicide or, a major incident, we get called in to do the work. But on a day-to-day basis, you're at your desk, reading through reports, calling people back, doing the follow-ups from patrol and all of that stuff. And just like with most stuff, it dies down. But what I will say, nobody messed with me like that, and I knew the people that I could trust and I knew the ones that I couldn't trust. But it was never any real thing where I felt like my life was in danger because of what I was doing, or they weren't going to back me up or anything like that, because I knew who would back me up and who wouldn't, so I knew who to depend on. So, just like that year when I was on patrol, whatever area, whatever zone you were working in, you see who you're working with. And man, I know I can't get into anything with this person, as my backup, because they're going to be off drinking coffee or hiding someplace. So you look and see who's on the shift. Okay, this brother, this sister. Hey, we got to cover one another because look how the shifts are this night. We got you covered. So you hear something on the radio, and then you perk up, and listen.
So it was always kind of a similar, kind of like a us against them type thing within
the walls of the police department. And I always say that the streets, what's happening on the streets. You know what you need to do, what you're supposed to do. It was in the police department within the walls to me, was my most dangerous place, because that's where all the decisions were made. That's where, the patting you on the back and stabbing you in the back, those type of situations. So that's part of learning what policing is.